Oh man, Colts Nation, finally, wait is over. I was getting a bit nervous there for a minute, but CJ Stroud, the final hour, finally declared for the NFL draft. Let's talk about it. It's been interesting to see that CJ Stroud's every move has not only been a story about himself, but has been like Colts news, And listen, I'm not naive. I understand the likelihood of us drafting a quarterback. That being said, am I the only one that's concerned that CJ Stroud isn't going to make it to our pick? Sure feels like it. And, I just want to make sure that after a tumultuous season like this one, that we're emotionally prepared for the possibility, because after all, let's face it, us Colts fans are in a very, very fragile state right now, and I'm laughing as like a defense mechanism for my sadness, So thus is the inspiration for today's episode, where we'll be exploring a world in which the Indianapolis Colts do not get CJ Stroud with the number 4 pick in the NFL draft. But before we do that, if it's your first time here, welcome, or maybe welcome back if you've been here before. You're listening to the 5th episode of the Ride on the Bench Colts Cast, a podcast made by a Colts fan for Colts fans like yourself. I'm your host, Justin Alfiero, recording in my bedroom studio. If you are a Colts fan, looking to help out a Colts fan, you can just shoot the video a like. That helps the cause tremendously. And as for subscribing, I'd be grateful if you did. But of course, if this isn't the video, that's totally fine. At the end of the day, I'm just making content and hoping that Colts fans enjoy it. And of course, if you're in a bit of a rush, to show my appreciation, I did make sure to timestamp this video below so you can skip to exactly where you want to be. But if you do have the time, I do encourage you to stand here or sit here and listen for the entire time. I mean, after all, I am making the whole episode, so of course I view the entire thing as important. All right, now that that's out of the way, I suppose it's only right to provide my primary reason for being concerned about this little draft situation with CJ Stroud, right? So as you already know, if you didn't already coming into this episode, I did state it at the top of the show. Of course, the Colts hold the number 4 overall pick in this year's draft, which sounds pretty good. And ahead of us are the Cardinals at number 3, the Texans at number 2, and of course the Chicago Bears with that coveted number 1 overall pick. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Justin, 2 of those teams already have a quarterback, right? The Bears just drafted Justin Fields, and the Cardinals, whether they like it or not, are stuck with Kyler Murray. So even if we don't end up with CJ Stroud, at the very worst, we'd end up with Bryce Young, right? Well, not so fast there, partner. But for starters, we all agree Chicago would probably be smart to trade that number 1 pick, right? Unless they have some sort of player in mind they can't see themselves getting in the event that they were to trade down into that 7 to 10 range, it's likely that they trade it. Now, some of you may turn that back around on me and say, well, do we really have any reason to believe that Chicago is smart and that they would do the smart thing? And to that, I would say, well, nothing. You got me. Fair play. Regardless, let's assume that they do trade the pick for the sake of the episode, okay? Now, they can, little voice crack there, they can just trade it to us, right? And then bing, bang, boom, we'd be done here, right? There'd be no episode, no discussion. You'd have reached the end of the podcast. But of course, I'm recording the podcast, so I'm going to take the route that requires some discussion, right? So when you look at the teams behind us that are in the top 10, you have 3 that definitely need a quarterback, right? You have the Panthers, you have the Raiders, and you have the Falcons. Simply put, any one of those teams, or if any one of those teams feel like they have their guy that they want, realistically, they're just as likely to trade up to number 1 as we are, right? And then that leads us to where I'm concerned. If any of those teams do trade up to that number 1 pick from Chicago, then in the first 2 picks, you're going to have no Bryce Young, and no CJ Stroud. Poof, gone. Ain't that a bitch? So now the question becomes, what do we do now? Well, that's what we're here to discuss, right? So now it's about time we start to sift through some of what we can do, likely or not, in the unfortunate event that it is that we are at the number 4 pick looking at the draft board and there is no CJ Stroud and no Bryce Young. So I'm going to start with option number 1 for you. Simply just drafting the next best guy. And now listen, I know this is the boring option because, there's really nothing there, right? The interesting part of that discussion becomes, who is the next guy? And while I can discuss that now, I do apologize. Full disclosure, I'm going to be making you wait until the next episode for my rookie QB rankings, right? Not to do a little ploy here. That's when you subscribe and you make sure that you hear the next episode about that. But I digress. So for now, we'll leave that alone. What I will say, though, is that I'm not even sure if I view this option as the most likely one. I mean, after all, Chris Ballard is very open about the fact that he does not believe in drafting a quarterback simply because it's like the conventional move or the status quo. He says what's more important is that you draft the right quarterback. And when you do that, no one's going to care when you did it or how you did it and the whole deal. And I'll tell you, that's one of those things, and maybe I'm alone in Colts Nation here. I could not agree with that anymore. So hypothetically speaking, if either 1, he views Bryce Young and CJ Stroud as a tier above everybody else, or 2, he doesn't think he needs to draft his next favorite guy at the number 4 pick, he can opt for the next option, which is, I'm sure you could guess, that was a bad drum roll, trading down. Now, I know the idea of trading down isn't some sort of riding the bench Colts cast original idea, right? But I want to take it a step further than I'm seeing around the internet right now, and I want to actually discuss what this might look like. So with that, it's time for me to put my GM cap on. Oh, shit. All right. Yeah, it's already on. Okay. So, we have some QB needy teams behind us, right? As I had mentioned before. And let's say in the scenario that one of them does trade up for that pick, you still have 2 teams that weren't able to trade up for that pick. Of those teams, it's possible that maybe one of them would be interested in moving up to our pick at number 4. If they do, and if that's what they want to do, here is what I would ask for if I'm the Colts. Obviously, I'd be asking for their first round pick, whether it be the 7, the 8, or the 9. I believe that would be, I believe that's the Raiders. I believe that's those teams in that order. I'm drawing a blank right now. Point being is that one of those picks will need to get, obviously. And then with that, we could get their second round pick as well. And now, let's see if we could get any more than that. But realistically, the crux of it, what I really need if I'm the Colts, is their first rounder that's also in the top 10 and their second rounder this year, at the bare minimum. So from there, if we make that trade, if you're following, we'd still have a top 10 pick in the first round, and then we'd have 2 top 10 picks in the second round. Now this, you ready? This is where the GM brain gets going. This is where it's going to get a little more juicy. So, you have the Eagles sitting at the number 10 pick. And while everybody, including the best teams in football, can use a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, if there's anyone who can afford to trade one, it might just be the Philadelphia Eagles. So are you ready for this? Upon trading down, remember what I said, not only do we have a top 10 pick still, let's call it 7 or 8, whatever, we have 2 second-round picks. I would offer the Eagles Kenny Moore and those hypothetical 2 second-rounders to grab their 10th pick in the NFL draft. And again, if they gave us anything else later on, that's great. That's gravy. We love gravy. But if not, I could live with that simply just like that. So now you're in a situation where we end up with 2 top 10 picks. Call it number 7, 8, or 9, and number 10. And with that, how many quarterbacks would be gone, right? We'd have Bryce Young gone, and we'd have CJ Stroud gone in the top 2. And then presumably whoever traded up to number 4 is doing it for a quarterback as well. And now from there, we kind of see what's going on. You have some other quarterbacks. Again, discussion for another day. But point being, from there is if the Eagles accept, not only can we draft a quarterback in the top 10, we could also use another top 10 pick to draft what we view as the best player on the board in a position of need. Now, whether or not it's one of those tackles and Paris Johnson and Peter Saransky, maybe it's an edge rusher, right, that can fill the potential departure of Yannick Ngakoue, or hell, maybe it's another cornerback, right? We just traded Kenny Moore. You have the Kylie Ringos of the world up there. Joey Porter, I think maybe a little early, right, in the top 10, but he does have that name value. Maybe if it's even a wide receiver like Quentin Johnson out of TCU or the kid out of USC. You pair him with Michael Pittman. All right. So that's my idea as far as the draft. That's like my first idea. Do you love that idea? Do you hate that idea, Colts Nation? Where are we standing on that? Do you view it as utterly ridiculous? Too much movement? I think the question becomes is that you have 2 trades going on in a relatively quick span, and do we expect Chris Ballard to do that? For me, and I know he gets a lot of flack for being conservative, and that is the case in free agency, where he hasn't been conservative is in the trade market, and especially in a year like this, where despite what I think about Chris Ballard and how I really love him and don't really think his job should be in like massive danger, he feels that heat, And this is a season where I could see him getting ultra aggressive in the draft. So with that, option 3, the final option. You ready? Is that a better drum roll? We could go into next season with Matt Ryan as the starter. Oh, man. I'm just kidding. I'm fucking with you. If that happens, I'll just end that show and, I'll go into hiding, right? Like Elvis Presley. No, really, though. I'm fucking around. I'm just talking about those first 2. And I just want to start getting us emotionally prepared again. That was the point of this little episode here. I want to start getting us thinking about what things might look like if we don't get CJ Stroud. Because, again, I am legitimately concerned that he's not there at that pick. And it's quite possible that maybe there's just a quarterback that you like better than him anyway. I know a lot of people aren't big on the Ohio State guys, so maybe you're into a Will Levis, maybe you're into an Anthony Richardson, and touch the mic, and maybe we're into something else. But with that, you have just listened to episode 5 of the Ride on the Bench Coltscast. If you made it this far, you couldn't have hated it that much. So now's about the time where you hit subscribe if you didn't already do it. Shoot us a like. You can check us out on Instagram, and when I say us, it isn't just me here. This is the Coltscast. My buddy has an Eagles cast, so maybe you somehow stumbled upon me and you're really an Eagles fan. You can go ahead and check out the Instagram page and our channel. We release only Colts content and only Eagles content. Collectively, we are the Ride on the Bench podcast. And if you've done all those things and you're still looking for a way to help out this show, if you could just share it with one person that you know that's as big of a Colts fan as you are, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. And with that is all I got for you. Nice quick listen for you today. Until next time, you just listen to the Ride on the Bench Podcast.